Yeah, how fun to have a playground like that to work in if you were a creator. To be like, all the gods have died, and we used their bones to save ourselves.
And we built a city
I could build
around
a castle on top of a snake skull.
That's so cool.
Oh, it's so interesting. Hello and welcome to Your Favorite Book.
I'm Tanner.
I'm Mallory.
We're siblings.
And we like books.
And on today's episode, we read Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne.
Oh, yeah.
Which is one of my favorite books. I read this when it first came out from a YouTube recommendation. And I loved it when I first read it. This is a very me book. And it is not as long as I remembered it. Because what I love are books that are really long. When I buy a book on Audible, because I usually like to listen to books, and I see that it's like only 18 hours long, I'm like, dang, it should be 40 hours long.
It's not a good use of your credit, too.
I know.
It's like...
I don't get any value out of it. And when it's like read into burning, it's 8 hours. I'm like, this thing is so teeny tiny. So I have a very different perspective of what a long book is than you, I think.
Do you happen to know how many pages it is?
I have no clue.
Me either.
If I were to guess, it would be around 350, maybe 400.
Really? I thought it would be longer than that.
Maybe it would be, yeah. It is a long book. Just to give you a brief idea of what this is, it's a Norse mythology-inspired epic fantasy following three characters. It's a 3 POV book. The main characters are Orca, Varg, and Elvar. A lot of the names sound very Norsey.
Yeah.
And sound very same. And there's lots of characters.
Yeah, that was I really struggled with the large cast of characters, especially that all of their names were 2-syllable names.
Or one.
Or 1-syllable name. And so sometimes I'd be like, okay, who is Ragnar? Because we also have Orgnar, or like something like that.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, I can't keep track of who is who.
I had the same issue when I first read the book. And now that I listened to it for the third time, I haven't finished it this time around. But those names, for some reason, they do stick in my head, and maybe because I've listened to it for a few times. But yeah, it is difficult to figure out who's who and what they're doing. Like, I would mix up Ragnar and other characters too.
Yeah.
And I think that is just par for the course with this subgenre.
It is, for sure.
Where it's like they're relying on that sense of mystery, and for you to keep clinging on to like fleeting details that are actually really important.
Yeah.
So for like 18 hours, you feel like you have to pay really close attention to understand what's going on. And so if you aren't totally invested in the story, I can see how you would drift away.
Lost. Yeah.
Or get lost, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely got lost while listening to this. I think this is the first real epic fantasy that you've suggested to me to read.
Yes. Assassin's Apprentice is kind
book.
of close because it's very long, but it's only one character.
Yeah, Assassin's Apprentice has a lot less characters, and they're introduced one by one, and then you get to know them, and then the next one is introduced, instead of like having 35 characters in the first 3 chapters.
Yeah.
So I definitely got a little bit lost, just because I've never really read epic fantasy before. I've read some large-scale fantasy books with like long series, but that's different than true epic fantasy.
Yeah. I think the biggest, or the closest thing to epic fantasy you've had me read was maybe Fourth Wing.
Yeah.
Big cast of characters, it's long book, but yeah, that's probably the closest thing to epic fantasy.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting for this show. I don't think either of us really understood what the other person liked.
Yeah.
Or read. And I almost recommended that you read something like The Way of Kings when we first started, which would have been a huge mistake.
I'm glad that I'm starting out smaller scale, for sure. Or
I think we both did.
Yeah, maybe even things that are closer to what I read. Because Shadow of the Gods is pretty close to what I read. I like mythology retellings. I like magic systems.
Really?
Like, yeah. So I think this is maybe an easier skipping stone to something like The Way of Kings. Because I do want to read that book at some point in my life.
Okay, and you don't have to like it because it just gets more epic fantasy.
Yeah.
Like if you thought the Shadow of the Gods was long, it's not as confusing. but it's like a 50-hour audiobook.
Wow.
54-hour audiobook. It's big.
Like, I thought 18 hours was pretty big for an audiobook.
It is big, yeah. Admittedly.
Yeah. And I mean, I've read books that length before. I'm reading another book right now that's like 16 or 17 hours, so pretty close. But it's a lot different. It's just a regular fantasy, not an epic fantasy. So it's easier for me to follow because it's more similar to what I read normally. Which is, why we did this whole podcast, so we could read each other's favorite books and expand our
perspective.
Taste, our perspective. And
stuff. Well, it is really curious because I did not anticipate how different our tastes would be.
Me either. I was like, oh, we both read fantasy.
Yeah, it'd be fun.
How far away could it be?
Yeah. So I'm curious because there are a few other books that I really like that are epic fantasy that I know you would not like at this point. And I think you feel the same way about certain books that you really enjoy.
For sure.
And it really does just come down to taste. So it's really curious. To explain what the plot of Shadow of the Gods is, very briefly, it's basically a travelogue with 3 characters. And the 3 characters, they don't know each other in the book, which is also part of the disconnect that I think people would feel when they read this.
Yeah.
Where it's like all 3 characters aren't in the same room going on the same journey, but it's from different perspectives. It's like they're from all around the world, but all of them are traveling to the same destination. So there is a bit of a connection there, where for some reason or another, each character has their different motivation. For some, it's revenge. For some, it's finding a conclusion to their past, and for some it's proving themselves or finding their family. But externally they all end up in the same place, and there's an overarching sinister plot by this evil group of Vikings that are working against our main characters, that's also traveling to this land of the gods, this fabled place where the gods had their final battle before they died, and nobody knows where it is, and the location is sealed away by magic, and it's extremely dangerous, but the promise of riches are great. Like, the scale is really epic and fun, and I loved all of that stuff when I first read the book.
Yeah, I really liked it too. I enjoy, I don't know if it's a trope, but I enjoy that type of setting where it's kind of like, oh, there's not that much hope of us getting to this final destination that might not even exist, but we're gonna try anyway. I really love that. I really love that. And Dragon Rider did that too. Very different book, but the same kind of thing of looking for a fabled safe haven that no one's been able to find.
It.
Yeah. I really love that. I think it opens up so many opportunities for misadventures and for fallbacks and for how to get your characters back up on their feet and back on their goal even when they get knocked down.
Yeah. They do a good job of like shrouding the place in mystery as well, because a bit of the world building is that it's inspired by Norse mythology. So each of the gods are based on animals. There's Líkrifa, the dragon god, and she's like the main villain god. There's a hawk god.
There's a rat god.
A fox god, a wolf god, a hound god. I think that might be all of them.
I think so.
Maybe 6 or 7. And throughout the book, there's exposition. I almost said light exposition, but it's not light exposition because it's an epic fantasy. I know, I have to keep remembering, like, I have a different perspective of epic fantasy.
That's a good point.
Like, exposition for Mallory is like a few paragraphs, and exposition for me is like a few chapters.
Yeah.
I don't know why we're so different in this way, but like, if it's a good book, for me, if it's 18 hours long, and I'm really invested in the characters and I can't stop listening and I'm hanging on to every word, and that was just how I felt while I was reading this. So even though the exposition, it can feel dry, I was fascinated by it. Like, he has this whole backstory of his world of like the gods fighting each other, and this is how their warfare happened. Like, the rat god worked with Rifa, the dragon god, to betray him, and it was mostly the wolf god and the hawk god that were kind of like the good guys, and they fought this war against dragon Rifa and her Vaesen, her children soldiers, that she created, monsters that this world is teaming with to fight on her side, Norse-inspired monsters, and I think they're custom homebrewed monsters by John Gwynne. I loved all that stuff, and they explain it several times throughout the book through exposition in various ways. Sometimes it's like at the beginning of the book, it's a father explaining to his son how Snuka, the snake god, that's another one that I forgot about. He gave birth to all the other gods, explaining the mythology. And then there's another character who finds this old rune stone, and she translates what happened in the war between the gods. So it comes up again and again a few times to explain that story to you. And I remember when I first listened to it, I was like, wait, who happened to what two god to trade?
That's how I felt the whole time.
Yeah. But for me, I was so invested in the story that I was like, oh, it wasn't a confused thing, oh my god, I have to just power through this thing. Yeah. It was more like, I need to know exactly what happened between these gods. And I don't know why. It just hooked me at the time.
Yeah. I love when you can find a book like that and you just devour it.
Yeah.
I was very confused for a lot of this book. And I think part of that is because it's a new genre to me. And I didn't focus as much as I needed to focus. And then I was like, oh, okay, well, now I'm a little bit confused. And then I feel like I missed a single kernel of cardinal truth that was a single sentence, that maybe I missed that one sentence. And then I was like, now I have no idea what's going on for probably 40 to 50% of the book.
That's fair enough. And those criticisms are completely valid.
Yeah, and the rest that I did understand, I really enjoyed. Yeah. In fact, I think I'm going to just reread the book again so that I can properly understand what happened. Because the stuff that I did comprehend and hold on to, I was like, oh, that's fascinating. I love how this character is responding to this. I love the magic that's happening and how they're discovering it. And I loved all of that. But when I was confused, boy, was I confused.
Yeah. And if you, like you said, if you miss it at the beginning, if there's some exposition dump at the third way point that you miss, understanding what happened to the gods before their war is actually pretty important for the story.
It's the whole ending.
It explains the motivations of very important characters in the book. So I completely understand if you drone out those parts of the story, and I'm curious if there are other epic fantasies that do a better job of exposition, and maybe it is just it's either really your thing, for me, where I love that type of stuff for this book, not for all epic fantasy, where it's you get these big world building expositions, or if it's an author skill issue.
I think that John Gwynne did a great job at it.
Okay.
I liked how he did it in various ways instead of just having a single really, really smart person and a single really, really stupid person who's new in town. And then the smart person tells them everything the audience could ever need to know. Yeah. That sucks.
Or it could be even worse. It could be a character finding a dusty old tome. Yeah. And then doing an encyclopedia entry.
Yes. So I really like how he approached exposition. There was just a lot of it.
There is, yeah. And it is essential to the plot.
Yes. I don't think it's needless or it doesn't feel self-righteous of the author being look at all this world building I did. It doesn't feel like that at all.
It feels like it applies to the characters and the journey that they're going on. Because in this world, it's 259 years. I think that's the number. Because I think that was one of the last things that I read before I stopped. Since the gods have died. And in that time, there are some humans who are the children of gods, and they have special abilities specific to that god. So I can't remember exactly. It's a little bit of a soft magic system.
Yeah, and
there's a bear god.
Yeah, one of the characters. Spoiler alert. It's been a long time since we've said spoiler alert on this podcast. It just is a giant spoiler alert. One of the main characters, Varg, is a descendant of the wolf god, I believe.
Oof. Ulfrier,
Yeah.
something like that.
Good job remembering all the names. I don't remember any of them.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, when I said Varg, I was like, is
it Varg?
When he becomes, he basically is a, oh my gosh, I can't remember the words. He's like a barbarian in D&D.
Mm-hmm.
And barbarians can
go into
rage, which
yeah.
gives them super strength, super abilities. They just become tanks and muscle up. And
Mm-hmm.
that
they
kind
get
of
claws
was,
and teeth.
yeah, that was kind of his similar kind of thing, where when he becomes upset and when he's battling people, it's described as like a red mist that clouds his vision and his whole identity, and he turns into a monster basically.
Mm-hmm.
Which I thought was really cool. I
Yeah.
really liked that.
I thought you would.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty slow burn until he reveals some of these cool things,
Mm-hmm.
Which I don't remember from reading it my first time. Like, it's maybe more than the first half of the book until you get to see some, like, magic-y action.
Yeah, it is quite a while.
Yeah.
Like, Varg's story starts with him trying to seek vengeance for someone who murdered his sister.
Yeah.
And he murdered his
Slave owner.
Yeah, his owner in one
He
of
was
those.
a slave,
Yeah,
or
he
a
was
thrall.
a thrall is what
Yeah.
it's called. And he murdered his slave owner, and he was in that kind of red haze and didn't quite. He woke up to him killing him, so he's on the run because they're after him for killing his slave owner. And so we get this sense of mystery of him being like, I don't know what I did. I don't know how I did it. I was obviously under the spell of something.
He was enraged.
Couldn't
Couldn't control himself.
Yeah, and I really, really loved that mystery element that pushed you forward for him.
Great point.
Because
Yeah.
he's like trying to find vengeance for his sister, and while he's finding that vengeance, he gets to understand who he is and what powers he might have.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked that pacing. It was really great.
Yes. And the reason why, like, all that, they call the people who are the descendants of gods tainted. And he does a good job of establishing, like, that people who are tainted in this world are seen as evil,
Mm-hmm.
because people blame the gods for destroying everything.
Yeah.
The gods went to war with each other, it led to all this destruction, and then all the gods killed each other in this war, so now, like, remnants of the gods are left behind, like the Vaesen, which are monsters, creatures of the night.
Uh-huh.
The creations of Ligrifa, who is the big bad dragon god. And the only things that can keep the Vaesen at bay are the bones of the other gods.
Yeah, there's a super, super interesting magic system in here. There's multiple, and I think there's hard and soft magic systems at play
Mhm.
here. But one of the hard magic systems is the bones of the gods and the remnants of the gods can grant people power, which I thought was cool.
And they keep the Vaesen at bay.
Yes.
So people flock to cities where it's like, in this tavern hall, there's a gigantic humorous bone
Mhm.
from the fox god, and it grants protection and luck to this entire town.
Mm-hmm.
So people live in these towns together, surrounded by these
It's
bones.
like little oasis
Of light.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved that
Yeah.
little world building detail.
Yeah, it really builds the whole tone of the whole book, where
Totally.
it's like everything is rotting and decrepit, and even some of those things that are rotting and decrepit are what grant you safety. Do you know what I mean?
No.
Like, the whole world is crappy and dark, and there's evil all about, and the only way to get protection from evil is still from a carcass.
Ah, okay. I see
thought
what
that
you're
was
saying.
interesting.
Yeah, because there is a city, and this was probably my favorite thing in the entire book,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a really underrated element of storytelling for some reason, is that his descriptions of settings, his descriptions in general are excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Very succinct,
Yeah.
but very visual. There's a town, I guess town is the wrong word, it's more like a city center, metropolis,
Mm-hmm.
built inside the skeleton of a gigantic snake,
Yeah.
the snake god Snukavik. And that's where one of the main characters, Elvar, is from. She's the daughter of the Jarl, or the king of this town. And when he first described that, I can just see it right away.
Yeah.
Like, they're sailing in on this pristine crystal blue lake surrounded by verdant green mountains on all sides, and then at the center of the valley, there's a gigantic snake skeleton. There's a city built on top of it, and I can just imagine a castle coming out of the skull.
Yeah.
It's like, that's so cool.
Yeah, his descriptions were absolutely amazing. Like the way that he would describe all of the monsters and all of the villains too.
Yeah.
Were so gruesome and fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes you get authors who over describe or under describe, and both are awful. But if you can find that perfect balance between picking your words carefully to show your audience what you want them to see, it's just fantastic.
Yeah.
And he's superb at that.
Yeah. Like, I can picture exactly what a tenua is.
Yeah.
Like, Vesely the tenua, she's a little bat creature with gigantic eyes, black skin, webbed wings. She's really cute.
Yeah, it reminded me of Bartok in Anastasia.
Oh, yeah. But maybe a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
Bartok the bat.
Uh-huh.
But his description of that creature is great. There's so much to talk about in this book. It's a big epic fantasy. Maybe we could talk a bit about each of these characters and their journeys, because you said you were confused mostly by like the exposition and the plot and the number of characters, but there were things that you liked about the book.
Yes.
And one of the things that you said that you did like was that the characters were good.
Yeah. I think my favorite character was probably Orca.
Mine too, for sure.
She's really cool.
And sad.
Yeah, and I love a sad character. I really do. Her storyline is she's happy. And she has a husband and a son. And then...
Well, she's not necessarily happy.
Yeah.
Because she's deeply, deeply traumatized.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in the way that anybody in an epic fantasy is happy.
Yeah. But we don't quite know why specifically she's so traumatized.
Yeah.
She just has visions of death and destruction all around her. But I know what you mean by when you say that she's happy.
She's in living stasis.
Yes, she's living a bucolic life away from all the pain and the strife of the world, in her own little safe haven with her tiny family, trying to find healing from her life of bloodshed and darkness.
And
Sorry.
No, you're correct. That's a good correction. Then her son and her husband get stolen away, and so
her husband is killed.
Oh, her husband's killed. Gosh, I keep on forgetting everything.
That's okay.
Her husband's killed and her son is stolen. So then she's like, well, I guess I gotta get out of retirement. Which is a funny way to put that. And so she's on a pathway to revenge to find who stole her child and who killed her husband.
Yes.
She has a really cool line about halfway through the book where she says, I am blood, I am death, I am vengeance.
Yeah.
And it's just a cool moment.
She's a really great character. Is there anything else? Okay, just because I'd like to go into a little bit more detail about how well he establishes Orca's character. And he really does make you feel an emotional connection to her and her family. At least for me.
Yeah, me too.
He takes his time establishing like the relationship between her husband and her son. Brecca is her son's name, and Thorin, I think, is her husband's name. So.
Thorin, Thorkel,
something like that. We'll call him Thorin for now. He doesn't last very long in the story, so it doesn't really matter. But yes, her story is a revenge quest to find Brecca, and there is some character growth for her, and they establish it really well by making Brecca more sensitive, obviously because he's a kid, and the way that she wants to raise her son is a little bit different than the way her husband wants to raise him. We get the sense that she and her husband have been through a lot of the same things together. They used to be Viking warriors. And Thorfinn, it's not Thorfinn. Whatever. The husband, he wants to raise their son more gently, let him be a child. He's only 10 summers old. And she wants to prepare him for how horrible life is. Like, she's almost at every turn trying to say to him, you could lose everything and you have to be prepared. You have to be hardened. You can't be happy. Your childhood could be taken away from you. And she's proven right.
Yes.
But Thorfinn is this nice, gentle, more caring presence. that keeps reminding her to like, hey, ease up on the boy.
Yeah. He's
like,
a child.
Let him be a child.
Yeah, he can laugh.
Yeah.
It'd be great if he did.
And that's part of why she loves him.
Yeah.
Is because he believes that there's still hope and brightness in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And he tries to teach her to cherish that. And I think part of her character arc is, while that she's on this revenge quest, to help people along her way.
Yeah.
Even though she
wouldn't do it normally.
A desolation internally after her husband's killed and her son is taken away. Mm-hmm. It's tragic and sad, but you were so motivated for her to get her son back.
Yeah, you really are right there with her every step of the way, trying to solve the mystery of what happened and track down the right people who are responsible. Yeah. It's so sad.
It is sad. But I think that's probably why she's my favorite character, is because with Varg, we don't get to know his sister before she's murdered.
Yeah.
And he's kind of on a revenge quest too, but he's more looking for like his stories about found family, because he's a slave. He had no one else except for Froya. And he is looking to get revenge, and he doesn't know who it is. So it's kind of similar to Orca and Elvar. She's looking for family too. Her father wants her to get married to some prince, and she wants to prove herself based on her merits and be valued based on her merits and not on her title.
Yeah.
So each character has a little bit of a different story, but Orca's, I think, is the most potent because he takes his time establishing this relationship between the people that she loves.
That's the beauty of having an epic fantasy, because you can be like, okay, I can take my time exploring what this relationship looks like and letting my audience sit in that comfort before I take it away from them. It kind of reminds me of in the Hunger Games, the intro, where we get Katniss and Prim, and we get a very sweet conversation between these two sisters of how, and we witness how Katniss takes care of Prim and loves her and would do anything for her, and then Prim gets chosen for the games. Like, I love that kind of setup too.
Yeah, it's so, and you really don't, Hunger Games is the perfect example, because you don't need to spend that much time establishing what the main character wants and how much it means to them before it's taken away. But taking it away is what hurts the most.
Yeah.
But if you establish how much it means to them correctly, then man, is it painful.
Yeah.
And even on my third time listening to this book, I really did feel like, oh, I know what's coming. It's gonna suck.
Don't do it.
Don't take Brekka, you bastards.
Yeah.
And so when Orca goes on this killing spree, and that's what it feels like throughout the entire book, his action descriptions are brutal. Like, she just finds a random group of people on the shore and just eviscerates them, and she tortures one of them to death. It is like gruesome.
It is.
But also kind of awesome, because it's like, get him!
I know, that's how I feel too. I'm like, hey, everything else in this world is evil and dark. Just keep going.
Yeah. I think Orca's also really important because he establishes that there is some brightness in the world. Kind of reminds me of the introduction to Demon Slayer, the anime, where it's like, before they take away Tanjiro's family, spoiler alert, sorry, it happens in like the first 10 minutes of the episode. You establish how Tanjiro is really happy with his family. So there's an opportunity for brightness. That tone contrast is really important.
Yeah.
If it's all death, darkness, and destruction, like effing Scorch Trials, like Shoot Me Now, I hate that.
I can't stand it. That's also, we are talking about so much anime today. That's why I don't like Attack on Titan too.
Yeah, it's all darkness.
There's no light. There's no glimmer of hope. There's no humor, and there's no nothing.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in media if there isn't a glimmer of hope.
Yes. Our tastes may be very different, but that is an area where we can both agree.
Yeah.
There is one thing that's missing in the tone that I would love, but I know it's just not John Gwynne's style.
Humor!
I knew you were going to say that. Yes.
Let's crack some jokes, you guys.
Yeah.
Okay, I remember one joke.
From this book?
Yes.
There's some jokes.
They're just
but they're not
great.
haha jokes.
No, they're not.
It's more like, oh, that's cute. The characters are joking with each other.
Yes.
What's the one joke you remember?
It's, okay. Is it Elvar who falls in love? Okay.
With Bior?
Yeah. They fall in love and then they start doing it. And someone's like, I can't sleep because you guys are always humping so much. And I was like, that was so out of the blue and it just felt so weird to me. I was like, there have been no jokes like up to this point. and that's the one you use.
Yeah.
So silly.
Yeah.
That's all.
No, it's just not John Gwynne's style. His style is like really serious, with some good heartfelt stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just different.
I guess he just doesn't like to laugh.
I guess not, but you know, he should lean into that. That's his thing. I just know that for me, I love a book where you can have a serious tone, but also be very funny.
Yeah, I agree. I think, like, when I was reading it, I wasn't thinking, oh, this needs more humor the whole time.
No, me neither.
It's crafted.
It is what it is.
So well, and it fits perfectly. The tone is great. It's not like it's missing it and you feel that missing.
Exactly.
I just like humor.
Me too. And I think if there was that contrast, it wouldn't work if they were trying to like apply Gideon the Ninth style humor. It would be bad.
No, that would be so bad. Actually.
I'm just saying that's what's keeping it from me saying like this is one of my top 5 books, you know, because all the action I like, the characters I like. I think I love this book the most for the world building. It feels really strange and mysterious and dangerous and also interesting.
Yeah.
For me. One last tiny detail about Orca before we move on from her. There is a very tender moment between her and her brother. Between she and her son before he's kidnapped. And Brecca is asking her, Mama, are you ever scared? And she says, yes, of course I am. And Brecca stands up, gets all bold, and he takes a moth away from a web that's trapped in a spider's web. And Orca's like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? And he said, well, if I was stuck and someone walked past me, I'd feel really bad or something like that. So he saves this little moth. And it's just this teeny tiny moment, but it comes up again. It's a great setup because after Brecca's kidnapped, Orca meets characters along her path who are like the trapped moth, and she's inspired by her son to save them.
It's so tender.
Yeah.
And even while she's searching and killing hundreds of people to find him, she's still like, I should do that because he would want me to.
Oh man, it's so great. And that's a part of the contrast too, right?
Yes.
I think a worse author would be like, nah, this is just an awesome action story, Orca getting revenge, and it's all death and bloodshed action. It's like, that's so one note. Like, give her
substance.
Exactly. Make her more 3-dimensional by giving her a light and a dark side.
Yeah. And
characterize both those sides of her, of who she is, through her family.
Yeah.
So she has the light side with Thorin and Brecca, and then her darkness comes from her past.
Yeah.
And we have a great reveal of who she is and where she comes from. We're not going to spoil that.
Yeah.
Read it for yourself.
Yeah.
Those revelations, to me, when I first read it, because I was so invested in the book, were super satisfying.
Yeah, they were really cool.
And it's a really cool way to like connect your 3 disparate POVs without making the main characters meet each other.
Yes, that is something else I was going to say. Sometimes you get authors who try to do multiverse or epic fantasies or different series where they try to combine them into one at the end. And it almost never works to me. It almost always feels so forced and such like a cash grab, or they're just trying to do Age of Ultron. I mean, Endgame, whatever.
Infinity War
all over again. But he does this so well where he does connect all 3 of them without it just being like, you're in room A, and you're in room A, and I'm in room A.
Oh my gosh, this is amazing.
Wow, this is insane.
Yeah.
It's much more interesting, and it's so satisfying.
Yeah, it feels more natural. And that requires so much world building.
Yeah.
Like, to me, I'm so impressed by epic fantasy authors who can manage this scale of story.
Yeah.
Like, all of the mythology world building, they're setting up and paying off, like, the dead gods coming back to life. Is that much of a spoiler? It kind of is.
That's okay.
It's what the bad guys want.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert, is to bring back their dragon god. They're also writing 3 different characters. Each of them have their own backstories, and some of them intertwine with some of the other characters in this book. They're setting up like 3 different Viking factions in this story.
It's a lot.
There's tons. They're setting up government stuff. Like, there's even a mini it's not really a subplot, but in the background, there's this queen who's trying to take over the entire world, and in this Norse setting.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it is pretty. I see it often in other Norse-inspired stories where it's like every tribe is led by a jarl,
Mm-hmm.
and the jarls get together and communicate with each other. But they're relatively small communities. And in this world, there is a queen, Queen Helga, who's trying to take over all of them. Like, I'm just saying that to explain how big this book is.
Yeah.
And to me, it's really impressive
Mm-hmm.
because it feels more lifelike.
Yeah, and it feels fully thought out. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't just feel like he halfway through was like, oh, what if I added a queen who's trying to overthrow everybody?
Yeah.
Sure.
Great point. Because they set that up with Varg. Like, he's a thrall, he's stolen his master's coins, and he has a Helga coin, and he brings it to a trader, and the trader says, Queen Helga, I don't accept that here, whatever. Or he's like, she's not a real queen. So even that teeny tiny detail is important to making you feel like, oh, the author has thought of everything.
Yeah, it's really amazing.
Yeah. Should we talk about the other characters?
Yeah!
So Orca's the best for me. Who did you like most the next?
Varg.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
So just to explain really briefly, throughout the first like third, maybe half of this book, it's mostly about Orca and Varg. And then the third character is Elvar. And she only has a couple of chapters, but she gets more attention towards the end of the book.
Yeah. That's part of why I was confused, because at first I was like, there were only 2 of us here. And now there's another. I really liked Varg the second best. I enjoyed how much mystery he had behind his character. And it's fun because it wasn't just a mystery to the audience, it was a mystery to Varg too. So you get to watch him try to figure out what happened to his sister, who killed his sister, and he's trying to seek help from a Sather witch who can basically help him commune with his dead sister.
Sether Witch is a descendant of Snukka, if I remember correctly, the snake god. And they can, like, do magical things.
Yes. And so he's trying to become a part of the Bloodsworn, right? That's the right tribe? Okay, he's trying to become a part of the Bloodsworn so that the Bloodsworn's Sather Witch will help him.
Yeah, and the Bloodsworn is like a Viking clan mercenary group of fighters that usually they say that they defend this port from pirates in this specific town. Logo is the Jarl. I remember so many weird small details about this book. But usually they travel around like doing things for money and gold, like most clans. Yeah.
I enjoyed getting to know his character. He was very guarded initially and very, don't talk to me. I am grieving and on a warpath.
And he kind of felt like a fish out of water.
Yeah, because he's been enslaved his whole life and then freed himself. And like, I love, there's a part about his character that I love when he's first meeting the Bloodsworn and they're like, what's your name? And he's like, Varg. And they're like, when I say what's your name, you give me your full name. And he's
first
like,
and last.
Yeah, and he's like, I don't know. And they're like, okay, Varg, no name. Or no sense. They called him No Sense because he made no sense.
Yeah.
I loved that addition. I thought it was so fun. And they kept that with him for the whole entire book.
So his name is Varg No Sense.
Yeah, which I really loved. I know it's just a small, kind of silly detail, but I loved it.
Again, it helps with the tone. Like, that's his sense of humor.
Yeah.
And it's perfect because it doesn't get in the way. It's just like, oh, I didn't realize how cute of a detail that was.
Yeah, for sure.
Varg, yes, he is kind of like our Watson character to the Viking clan world building of this story.
Yeah.
And for the magic too, right? Because he later learns that he's a descendant of the wolf god. And what does that mean? And everyone else on the ship, every other member of the Bloodsworn, they're also tainted. So you learn more about like this Aina the half troll. He's half troll, and that's a descendant of one of the bear gods, right? Of the bear god. That stuff's great. But he also does a really good job, and I think this is because John Gwynne is like a LARPer. And like,
is he really in real life?
Yeah.
Oh.
And I think both his sons are. I'm a bit of a John Gwynne stalker on the internet. And so he understands, like, it feels like he's done his research for what Vikings would use when they would go on voyages.
Yeah.
So they have their sea chest they sit on when they row, and they keep all their belongings inside of it. all those world building details felt real to me, and I loved learning about like, ooh, this is cool. He has like flint and steel. He has a sax. He has an axe. Like I don't know. It was a tiny detail again, but it felt like I was equipping myself alongside Varg.
Yeah,
as I was introduced to this Viking world.
I really enjoyed that too. I liked how they described all of that stuff, not just when it was needed. Sometimes it feels like people are like, oh, we're having a fire pit. Good news, I have this flint and steel and food and plates. And do you know what I mean? And it's just like this never-ending bag of holding that has all the stuff they need in it just when they need it.
Yes, when it's convenient.
Yeah, versus him meticulously explaining exactly how the ship runs. And it's just like, you can really embrace that meticulous detail with epic fantasies, and I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, so do I. Shall we talk about Elvar?
Yes.
Is there more about Varg? I guess briefly I'll say that he does have an emotional story. It's not quite as potent as Orca's. But his adventure is very simple. His story is more plot driven. Most of the story, I would say, is plot driven.
Yeah, for sure.
Except for Orca's, who's on a revenge path, and we care about that. But it's almost like each character kind of serves their own purpose for the story, which is nice. They feel distinct in that way. And Varg really does kind of feel like our typical protagonist for an epic fantasy.
Yeah.
Straight white dude.
Yep.
He goes from like an
Zero
orphan
to
child,
hero.
zero to hero, slave to hero of the day. So he's not super interesting. His personality is also very typical, reserved but noble, right? Actually kind of similar personalities between all three of our main characters.
Yeah, that's what made it a little bit confusing to me too.
And that's why a comedy's so great. 'Cause when you write with a comedic voice, you can make your characters really goofy and distinct.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. I think that's all for Varg.
Yeah.
I liked him.
So did I.
Yeah.
Everything
It worked great.
about this story for me was really likable. It just wasn't like, okay, the character dynamics maybe is his weakest point.
Yeah.
Where it's like if Elvar, Varg, and Orca were in the same room together, they would solve the problem the exact same way.
Yes.
Or very similarly.
Yes.
And that's the best test to put your characters through. To know if you have like good, distinct personalities.
Dispersed or diverse people.
Even if their motivations are different, and that stuff makes sense, it's different from personality stuff.
Yeah.
Which is really underrated also. We've talked about this in sci-fi fantasy before. Like, I think it's part of why we love Gideon the Ninth. Gideon, Harrowhark, and Ianthe would each completely different. And it's such an underrated skill, and that can take you so far. Like, your plot can be boring as hell. It could be as boring as the elevator's broken, and this is the script writing technique thing, and how do we fix it?
Yeah.
But if you have good character dynamics, you can make that scene interesting. And this story relies more heavily on plot and interesting world building as opposed to strong characters.
Yeah.
They're good enough characters.
Yeah, I really liked them, but yeah, you're right. They were all very similar, which is part of why I had struggled with all of them.
Yeah. So, shall we talk about Elvar?
Yes, I feel like I don't know that much about Elvar.
That's okay, and there's a reason for that.
Okay, good.
She plays probably the smallest role in this book. It's not until the second half that we learn more about her.
Yeah.
The reason why I like Elvar is because of the place where she's from. I love her home.
Her Snake City.
That's such a cool setting.
Yeah, how fun. How fun to have a playground like that to work in if you were a creator. To be like, all the gods have died, and we use their bones to save ourselves.
And we built a city
I can build
around
a castle on top of a snake skull.
That's so cool.
Oh, it's so interesting.
Yeah. But Elvar, her motivation is to prove herself because her father only saw her value in expanding his power by marrying her off to some kingdom far away. So she ran away before the story begins. We get an introduction to her hunting some tainted. She ran away to work for Ragnar, who is a slave trader, and he runs a group of Vikings called, can you not remember the name? I can't either.
It's not the Bloodsworn, though.
No,
that's Varg.
It's a different Viking clan, but they're similar.
Yeah. I can't remember it.
Once again, it's part of the scale.
Uh-huh.
It's huge.
Yeah.
And she is looking to prove herself based on her merits.
Mm-hmm.
Our introduction to her is that she is very competent,
Yeah.
and she hunts a troll, and Ragnar, her chief, gives her like a troll
tooth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and she hangs it around her neck.
Mm-hmm.
And she feels like Ragnar is more of a fair father figure than her father, because he's saying, I'll love you based on your competency.
Yeah, you killed this troll, and I appreciate you and your work for our
Yeah.
tribe for that reason.
And that's what she wants.
Mm-hmm.
But they go back, they capture this tainted person
Mm-hmm.
and his family, this bear tainted,
Mm-hmm.
gigantic man. Take him back to her father, because he will buy those tainted people
Yeah.
and turn them into slaves.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we figure out like why she wants to be with someone like
Yeah.
Ragnar and his crew.
I think that's pretty compelling. Like, at first I was kind of like, okay, this is fun. What are we doing here, though? Until we get that kind of backstory.
Yes, she does lack kind of an external goal.
Mm-hmm.
Like Varg, very cut and dry.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk to a Sether witch to find out what happened to my sister when she was died, so I can avenge her death.
Mm-hmm.
Orca, my family was taken from me, and I'm going to get revenge.
Yeah.
With Elvar, it's kind of like, it's a little bit more subtle, which I appreciate,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a bit of a lack of conflict with her
Yeah.
character. And I love that she goes back to her father
Mm-hmm.
right away to establish that conflict of like, she never had his love and he's trying to control her.
Mm-hmm.
But before she leaves, Ragnar sells the thrall, and
Mm-hmm.
before she and her crew leaves the city, her father says, I'll give you what you want, I'll let you lead a group of drinkers.
Uh-huh.
And drinkers are like soldiers with swords.
Yeah.
Glad I can remember that word. Like, her father offers him everything that she wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And she decides that it isn't what she wants to be happy, and she decides to go with Ragnar and his crew
Yeah.
to find Oscutreth, which is the land of the dead gods.
Yeah.
So she's going to the same location as Orca will eventually,
Mm-hmm.
because the bad guys are capturing children,
Yes.
which we established at the beginning.
Yes.
So for me, it's kind of like they established Elvar's conflict, which is
Mm-hmm.
wanting her father's love, and then resolved it pretty quickly, where it's like
Yeah.
she found it with Ragnar
Yeah.
and with Grend.
Mm-hmm.
Grend is like her protector.
Mm-hmm.
He promised to protect Elvar's life after her mother died.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's nice backstory stuff
Yeah.
like that. And Grend will follow her wherever she goes. And eventually she realizes, Grend, you are really more of a father to me than my dad ever was.
Yeah.
So it's a nice little arc and resolution, but it's kind of like you introduce her conflict and then you resolve it right away.
Yeah, it's not nearly as interesting as I keep on going into blind rages and murdering people, but I can't figure out why.
Yeah. She's not a tainted. She's just
Yeah.
kind of a princess.
Mm-hmm.
She's just kind of boring.
Yeah, she is.
I'm not entirely sure what role she plays in the story, other than she's our point of view into the Dragonborn and
Mhm.
what their goals are.
Yeah.
So she's kind of like, that's her purpose for her
Yeah.
characters, to show us like what's happening with the bad guys in the story.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like,
It's just kind of weak.
yeah,
It could have been more interesting, I think. I don't know how, though. So
I had an idea.
Oh, yeah?
Well, part of it is that it's an epic fantasy. We have 3 different characters and we like them for different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a huge deal that Elvar's, the most interesting thing about her is that she's traveling to Oscutreth. And she's like, I'm going on an adventure.
Yeah.
And Ragnar and Grend loved me, and I don't need my father's approval anymore. Because you already care about Orca.
Yeah.
You have an emotional connection with her. You care about Varg and learning about who he is,
Mm-hmm.
trying to avenge his sister's death.
Yeah.
Although we don't get very much progress on that.
Mhm.
Except for at the end, he does, his wish is granted, and he does get the vision of
Yeah.
his sisters from the Sether Witch. But I think you could have made Ragnar more manipulative. So
And
Ragnar's
more
her
of a
chief.
foil to her father.
Yeah, where it's
Uh-huh.
like Elvar's misbelief, her conflict is like looking for someone to trust.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or she doesn't know who to place her trust in. She's looking for a replacement to her father.
Mm-hmm.
And she could have it with Grand, but not realize it.
Yeah.
And be like, stop following me. You're so embarrassing. Ugh.
Yeah.
And then Ragnar will be like, here's a troll tooth. Now do this other thing for me. And it's like a bad thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Am I explaining myself
yes,
well?
no, I'm understanding. That would have been much more interesting and compelling.
Yeah.
And it would have helped her, her path match the emotional complexity as the other two.
I think so too. Because at the end of the story, she could realize, oh, Ragnar has just been manipulating me, taking advantage of me, wanting his approval.
Yeah, in the same exact way that my father has.
But in a different... From a different angle.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then at the end of the story, she could realize, oh, Grant has always been there for me. He's always loved me unconditionally. I'm going to reject what Ragnar wants from me because he's asking me to like swear this blood oath to find Oscutreth just so he can enrich himself. What a bastard.
Yeah.
You know? But I love Grant, so then she risks dying from the blood oath that she swore to disobey Ragnar to save Grant's life.
Yeah.
Right? That would have been great.
Yeah.
And maybe you could have done that if it was just like, this story is only about Elvar.
Exactly.
But because it's so big, it's kind of, for me, a minor complaint.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that does bring a good point, because you can't have 3 characters be the whole huge, all of them have gigantic plots, because at that point you just want to write 3 books about one each character.
Yeah.
Having to smush it into one epic fantasy, you're gonna have to lose details here and there in order for it to work.
Yes. So I don't think it's really a weakness of the story, because it is what it is.
Yeah.
Elvar's story serves its purpose.
Yeah.
Which is we get a glimpse into the motivations, machinations of the bad guys. So, I don't know, maybe it's a different story.
Yeah.
Brandon Sanderson's The Way of Kings is similar. It's multiple POV. And there are some characters who have more of an arc than others in that book, and it's for the same reason.
Yeah.
If you're going to give each character a really powerful character arc, then you may as well just write 3 separate books.
Yeah, you can't have 3 leads.
No. So it's a really interesting observation, actually. If your goal is to write an epic fantasy of this scale, focus on making one of them your emotional lead.
Yeah, and then your support ones.
Yeah,
your support cast. Have to take a step back.
Yes, and give them each their own role. So Varg gives us more of a glimpse into the magic system.
Yeah.
And then Elvar gives us a glimpse into the bad guys and their motivations. It's really cool.
Yeah, and it works.
And it feels intentional.
And once I started realizing those separations, it was easier for me to follow the plot of the book.
Yeah. And I think you don't have to listen to it again. I'm not giving you any of that pressure. But for me, I loved it more on a second read through.
I want to read it again.
Okay.
Because I know the stuff that I did like, I really did enjoy. So I'm like, imagine if I can enjoy the whole book in this way.
Yeah. The second time I read it, it made a lot more sense. But that's what I love about an epic fantasy. I love finishing an epic fantasy and being like, I don't know what happened.
I want to read it again.
I would do it all over again. I think Gideon the Ninth is like the perfect middle ground for a book that you love.
Yes.
And I love.
Yes.
Like for both of us, it's like, for me, it's almost in my top 5 favorite. Nona the Ninth, which is the 3rd book in the Locked Tomb trilogy.
It is my favorite book series I have ever read.
I know, and this is a review about Shadow of the Gods. I know that in every episode we talk about like Hunger Games, Shadow of the Gods, and Gideon the Ninth and Throne of Glass, right? Every episode. But I just have to say, because we brought it up at the beginning of the episode, like we both have very different tastes, and Gideon the Ninth offers everything that both you and I want in the same story.
Yes. It does help that it's literally the most beautifully word-crafted book I've ever read.
Yes.
But obviously, I'm not biased at all in my opinions, and I'm objectively correct.
Yes, but it's the greatest book ever made. It gives you that tone contrast of humor, horror. I think we both like horror stories.
I do.
Gruesome, brutal action.
Yeah.
A really heartfelt main character with an emotional character arc. It's only one POV, but the cast is huge. So this epic scope is there for me. The world building is so mysterious.
Yes.
More than any other book I've read. That also serves the epic scope. And the adventure is pretty short.
Yeah.
like, I don't remember how long the first book is, but it's much shorter than Shadow of the Gods.
Yeah, probably.
It's maybe like 11 or 12 hours.
I think so.
So, is Getting the Ninth one of your favorite books? No, that's not what this is about.
Is Shadow of the Gods one of your favorite books?
I have to say yes.
Yay!
Because I'm on my third read through.
Yeah.
I love the sequels. They just get crazier as they go on. Or the sequel, I guess. The third one comes out soon. Yeah, I really love this book. And I would definitely recommend it.
Yeah.
Is this one of your favorite books?
No, but it could be after my second reread.
That's completely fair.
Yeah.
I did not expect you to love this book.
I really what I did enjoy. I really did enjoy.
Yeah.
I just was confused a lot.
Yeah. Would you recommend it?
Yeah.
Maybe to the right person?
Yeah, to the right person for sure.
Someone like me,
sure.
maybe not a reader like you.
Yeah.
I completely understand.
Yeah. But it was good. I enjoyed it and learned a lot too. So.
Oh, good. I think I kind of misremembered some things about the book. Like the pace, the length, and I know that those are things that aren't your cup of tea exactly. It
was a little bit slow.
Yeah.
But I knew it would be slow, so I didn't have a problem going into it.
Because I like the big boring books.
Yeah.
But I think I'm getting better at like knowing, okay, I think you'd like the Norse mythology stuff.
Yes, I enjoyed that.
The magic and the world building's cool.
And I love the characters.
And I knew you would like some of the characters. But good. I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah, thanks for recommending it.
Of course. And thank you for watching if you made it this far. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. And leave a like, that helps us out in the algorithm.
Oh, yeah.
Like, we care. We don't care about being popular.
No.
We want fewer people to watch the show, actually.
Once again, back to our first two viewers, Mom and Dad.
Thank you for watching, Mom and Dad. Please leave a comment, you two.
Bye-bye.
Bye.